The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Hello and welcome to the Christmas edition of The Gloves Are Off. Hopefully you had a great time and Santa was nice enough to give you some nice treats. Speaking of treats, I've been pleased to be joined by this group of panelists here joining me for the Christmas edition of The Gloves Are Off. To my left, Nerman Issa with New Cap Sports. Of course, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, also pleased to be joined by this man. We will start off with Brett Morton on the other side. I know, Brett, you're with us for almost a year now, and you've kind of experienced everything. Thank you for joining us, my man.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, I'm the sweetest of all the treats you got here.
Okay, well, hold that off. We'll talk to this guy.
Real
right
treat.
Now. All right, Andrew Brethauer, editor, sports editor for the Lloydminster Source. Pleased to be joined by this man. How are you?
I'm great. Can't be more happier to be here.
All right, man. Pleased
You're
to have
like
you on.
that one juju, there's always that one gross flavor no one wants. That's the treat right here.
All right, and I'll tell you.
More topics.
All right, guys, everyone's getting into the Christmas eggnog, so let's get into this whole thing real quick. And we'll start off, of course, with this show. It's going to be a little bit different. We're going from 10 to 1 in terms of the top 10 stories that happened in 2015. And they also include local stories. So there's a lot of things we left out here, but we will give some props to as we go down the show. But first, I want to start off with number 10. And it's going to be, drum roll please. I guess we have no drums. Thank you there. Great production here at New Cap. Local football. Talking about the Barons and Raiders. Both high school football teams had I guess you would categorize as a darn good seasons in terms of where they came from the year before, even years prior to that. Particularly the Barons, of course. And you look at the Raiders, the defending Tier 4 champs, moved up a tier and seemed to dominate, albeit got a tough beatdown in the final. But overall, Andrew, we'll start off with you on this question. What do both programs do now, moving forward? If you look at the success they've had, there's got to be a certain ceiling they must have hit. And I know there's a lot of people, Vince Oreo is a guy who talks about that.
Well, they're both, if you look at both of them, losing might be the best thing to happen to them this year, because the Raiders needed to kind of maybe get back to reality to kind of say, okay, where do we go from here? We're at a new tier. We need to play tougher opponents. We need to start moving up. Does that mean we stay in the Wheatland League? Do we move up to another one? That's the question they asked. The Barons now, they've had that success at home. Now they have to do it provincially. And they're in the same kind of boat too. Where do we go? How do we get better as a team? And for them, it's more about getting bigger, getting stronger, and more football sense, and Harper's getting there with his team. That's a great thing. It's just about building these programs back up, and they're already there.
You look at the Barons, right? They made their provincials. They made it all the way to the North Final before losing to St. Joe's, who went on and ended up, they did lose in the Alberta Bowl. But you look at the Barons, one thing that they really need to do is get over that hump of being able to beat Holy Rosary, right? I think if they are able to beat Holy, I think that'll be a whole entire makeshift for that organization, that program, because, you know, they can compete with the Holy Rosaries and win the Wheatland Football League if they could beat that team. And you look at Holy, you touched on it, right? The Wheatland Football League is a great league to play in, but when they're playing games where their quarterbacks and their third-year-old guys are only playing half a quarter and the game's already over, you can't compete in Tier 3 when you get to Cochrane because they're just going to roll you over like what happened down there. So the biggest thing is they got to become a program that can compete with those Tier 3s, and if that includes maybe just getting players that are going to play all the time and not having guys come out just because, you know, I want to be a Raider, play football just to be there with emotions. They're going to need guys that are going to be there 100% committed all year, 12 months of the year to be able to win in Tier 3.
Well, see, here's the problem. So when you look at the Barons, you mentioned it, they have to beat Holy Rosary. If you don't beat Holy Rosary, you're not going to beat other teams. Why? Because Holy Rosary can't beat the other teams. And Holy Rosary set the standard when it comes to football here in the border city. The big issue, too, is you can't compete, you can compete against these bigger markets, but when you're looking at places like Edmonton and Southern Alberta, football is ridiculous there. When you have a larger talent pool to choose from, it's easier to build that superstar team, right? Like the athletes here, it's fantastic, but some might have to travel from other places, or you got a smaller pool. Football here in the city is really good. It's just the problem, though, is once you play the same opponents over and over and over and over again, and then you expand and you go out and you go to places like Edmonton and Cochrane and all that stuff, and you realize, oh, it's a little harder. The Raiders, they just need to find a different league, I'd say, something where they can kind of get challenged throughout the regular season instead of finding that in the provincials.
So does it maybe, in this case, for you guys, I guess, maybe find more Edmonton teams to play for both the Raiders and the Barons, albeit they're in different tiers, so they won't always face each other. But if they want to grow, much like you guys have been saying, does facing Edmonton teams or making that road trip make sense? Make the most sense?
Scenery is nice because when you look at how many high schools are in Edmonton, they can compete against so many, right, and change things up. Here, you only have the 2 that they have, right? It might have to be, in talking to Vince Oreo, it's the same thing. Like, there are some harder teams to challenge here in the Wheatland Football League, and there's others where the football program is not as strong as it would be here in the border city. It's just something needs to be done. There's only so many times you can win your league, or you can go undefeated in seasons only to get that heartbreak when you try and move up. Everyone wants to move up to Tier 1. You want to try and get that competition.
Or they need to stop playing those teams that they shouldn't be playing. And let's be honest, teams like Westlock, teams like Vermilion, teams like Athabasca, these are not teams you want in your schedule. And this year, and since I've been here, we've gone through 3 different ways of running this league. And it's a terrible system when you can't, every year you're playing somebody, you're playing a different schedule. They got to get rid of those kind of games where, as you said, their starters are coming out after the second quarter. They need to get back into playing, Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul, Barons, Raiders, those 5, and then travel. And then that means going down to Calgary, going to Edmonton, going up and playing Grand Prairie.
I want to get to number 9 now, and I want to talk about it's football, but in a different sense, European football. Talking about soccer, the Women's World Cup here in Canada. It seemed to be a success to a certain extent. Of course, the Americans dominating, winning the whole thing. But if you look at it from Teams Canada's aspect, when they were in the bronze medal game in 2002 in the Olympics, everyone just all of a sudden, I would say, jumped on the bandwagon, but they captured the country. This time around, they wanted to build off that in 2015, hosting. They built up this team, saying they were better than they were 3 years ago. They ended up going to the quarterfinals and lost. Do you feel that their performance helped or hurt soccer in this nation, Brett?
I think it helped 100%. The way that they did and the young players that they brought, like Kadisha Buchanan, she just won Female Soccer Player of the Year, and she was up for the Lou Marsh, or was in the discussion, I should say. When you have players like that are coming in, everybody's known Christine Sinclair, and that's all you know, Kara Lang maybe. But other than that, there's really, who else is there? But now you got these younger girls that are coming up and helping grow the sport of soccer. And like you said, Canada, I think they put on a fantastic event, like showing that. And the Americans did end up winning it, which probably some Canadians like, oh, the Americans. But, that team is fantastic. Abby Wambach's been one of the greatest soccer players in the world, and she just retired, right? So it was great to see the Americans go out the way they did for, like, say, the Abby Wambachs and the stuff like that. And, a lot of people were saying a lot of this year was to help Christine Sinclair maybe get that jump. But I think in the broad spectrum of it all, I think it just grew Soccer Canada more than anything.
You hosted the World Cup on home soil. Of course, everyone, and you don't want to say jump on that bandwagon, but I love the fact that fans went out and supported those teams, whether or not Canada was playing. America won. They deserve to win. They're a stacked team. They are the team to beat, as is Canada is when we were playing hockey, right? But I look at that, and exactly what you said is sometimes, like, when people complain about, oh, they're not getting the same kind of coverage as men's World Soccer, World Cup, it's night and day. Like, these two, you cannot compare the two. But I just think the way Canada kind of acted up in the way that maybe you could now look and see these new superstars instead of Sinclair just being the only one. But
Andrew?
In a sense, it's just now we're always going to talk about women's soccer. And at least in Canada, I think we hosted it. Now in 4 years when they do the World Cup again, we're still going to talk about it. This isn't going to be something where it's a fringe anymore. People in Canada are passionate about soccer, and we're going to continue talking about soccer, which is going to be a great thing.
All right, guys, we're going to take a commercial break and come back with 8 and number 7 on our top 10 list.